People dismissed her as merely a mechanic, claiming she was past her prime and lacking speed. However, when a massive snowstorm closed all major routes and a countryside medical facility desperately needed supplies, she was the sole volunteer. Martha carried battle scars from her military service and possessed unwavering determination. Could she make it through the tempest, or would it claim her as another victim? The frigid gusts penetrated the metal structure of the shipping area like a sharp weapon. The freezing temperatures invaded the workshop despite being indoors, wrapping around limbs and exposed flesh with a painful grip. Martha remained unfazed. She layered her clothing beneath work overalls, wore insulated footwear, and kept an olive-colored military coat that predated many of her coworkers. Her worn, capable hands worked smoothly across the diesel motor of a Kenworth that had run too long the previous day. She went largely unnoticed. The younger operators, some barely adults, passed without acknowledgement. Pete juggled his mobile device and morning food while strutting by her work area, laughing. Marlon blasted his radio while griping to the dispatcher about driving in the light snowfall already coating the ground. Someone had recently whispered merely the mechanic when she fixed the torque measurements on a vehicle's axle. What could she possibly understand? Martha's knowledge was extensive, though she rarely spoke unless discussing vehicles or when questioned directly. She cleaned her hands with a cloth and rose, stretching her tight muscles while observing the distant sky through the open workshop entrance. Dark clouds were gathering. Her body sensed the approaching weather system. Within the coordination center, agitated voices could be heard. Northern routes were becoming impassable, according to one speaker. A medical facility in Millertown had contacted them regarding a critical shortage. Just 10 hours of emergency medications remained. Another younger, anxious voice insisted passage was impossible in these conditions. Martha continued cleaning her tool methodically, eaves dropping through the transparent barrier. She then approached the notice area where weather alerts had been posted. Severe winter storm anticipated, zero visibility probable, movement strongly advised against. She examined the notice briefly before returning to her workspace, retrieving her equipment case, and arranging her instruments with the same careful attention she had once applied when loading crucial supplies under hostile fire. Unwelcome recollections surfaced, as they frequently did. Desert conditions, extreme temperatures, machinery that failed under stress. Protective coverings fluttering above containers labeled as medically urgent. The quietness preceding a military transport's departure. The roaring motors that could either preserve lives or endanger everyone. In the current moment, the external winds grew more forceful. Someone in the coordination office cursed. None of the male drivers would accept the assignment, too dangerous. Even the snow-clearing equipment was falling behind. Martha showed no reaction. She retrieved a worn insulated bottle from the storage area, marked with scratches and a faded military base emblem, and filled it with coffee. The liquid was cold, but she consumed it regardless. At that moment, Darren, the facility supervisor, emerged from his office appearing stressed and scanning the area. He inquired about Martha's location. She indicated her presence with a raised eyebrow. He turned toward her, showing momentary relief. He explained they faced a critical situation. A medical facility 2 communities away was in desperate need. He understood mechanical work was her assignment, but they had a serious problem. She acknowledged she'd heard about it while setting down her container. She asked which vehicle was prepared. He wavered, admitting nobody was willing to make the journey. Her gaze sharpened. She clarified that wasn't her question. Darren hesitated before indicating Old Unit 704. The Kenworth remained functional but hadn't been operated this winter. Martha agreed and instructed him to prepare the cargo. Darren attempted to confirm her decision, noting the hazardous road conditions. She stated simply that she'd navigated worse situations. She approached the vehicle without further discussion, opening the driver's entrance as though it was routine. And it was perhaps not this precise model, but she'd operated larger, heavier vehicles in locations where navigation charts were approximate and satellite positioning was unavailable. In regions where driving meant avoiding explosive devices and hoping your destination hadn't been destroyed by artillery. Back in the workshop, the younger operators had congregated near the snack dispensers, observing through the glass. Pete doubted she'd actually depart. Another called her insane. Someone labeled her a relic of the past. They predicted she wouldn't travel 5 miles. However, Jaden, the most recent hire at barely 20 and still in preparation, observed silently. His knowledge of Martha was limited. She consistently worked independently and never took easy routes. Yet something in her movements, composed, methodical, as though the storm posed no threat, made him pause and reconsider. Martha entered the cabin, performed a system inspection from memory, then activated the ignition. The motor awakened with a profound, consistent rumble. She smiled inwardly. This vehicle possessed resilience. She didn't prepare luggage, simply grabbed her bag containing several tools, an emergency flare device, and a protected map with annotations in fading ink from another era, another existence. Before departing, she reached into her coat pocket and touched a small wrapped item, a military honor received years earlier but never exhibited. It wasn't meant for others' eyes, merely a reminder that presently, at this moment, she remained capable of accomplishing meaningful tasks. The workshop entrance rose gradually, admitting the freezing wind. Snow particles swirled like apparitions in the early light. Nobody applauded or saluted. Yet for the first time in many weeks, Martha experienced renewed purpose. No longer just a tool in someone else's operation, she drove onto the main route. Passing inactive vehicles and skeptical observers, she murmured something quietly. She wondered if she still possessed the ability. The storm awaiting on the skyline provided its response with a roar. The vehicle groaned as Martha ascended into the cabin, her joints stiff from years of crouching beneath axles and navigating engine compartments. The Kenworth W900 resembled a dormant creature beneath accumulated salt and grime, its metal finish dulled by seasons of disregard. But she understood its fundamental structure. This particular model had been constructed for longevity, and she'd maintained it sufficiently to be available when anyone, required it. That individual turned out to be herself. The previous occasion she had traversed a similar passage had been in Afghanistan. 6 vehicles, 3 armored utility vehicles, 2 supply transports, and an armored personnel carrier, all loaded with hydration, plasma, and field provisions. Their unit had received orders to reach a besieged installation. The sole roadway was confined, vulnerable, and monitored. They proceeded regardless. Only 3 returned. Martha had operated the leading vehicle. They never anticipated her successful passage, but she accomplished it. And subsequently, nobody regarded her with the same expression again. The communication device suddenly crackled, interference initially, followed by a weak voice. "Is anyone receiving? This is Mayville Hospital." She manipulated the dial forcefully. "This is Transport 94, Martha stated firmly. En route with critical medications. Storm disrupting communications. Repeat. I am proceeding toward your location." A pause occurred. Then the voice resumed. Clearer now, delicate and desperate. "Thank the heavens. Please understand, oxygen supplies are nearly depleted. We've had to manually ventilate 3 patients. I'm uncertain how much longer we can continue. I'm approaching," Martha stated before the transmission vanished again. She stared at the radio equipment, jaw tightened. That voice had fractured on the final word, not from cold temperatures but from fear. A nurse, young judging by her tone, left isolated to maintain people's survival with rubber protective coverings and optimism. She couldn't disappoint her. Back at the storage facility, the storm continued assaulting the corrugated barriers. Operators had grown silent. No additional humor, no additional swagger. The coordination display blinked with notifications, route blockages, and temperature reductions. It resembled warfare in electronic format. Jaden occupied a desk near the rear section alone, mobile device in hand. He wasn't browsing social platforms. He was examining a PDF military record. He hadn't intended to investigate, but something regarding Martha's acceptance of that vehicle, no wavering, no formality, had disturbed him. The document confirmed it. Martha L. Wilkins, United States Army, Logistics Support Battalion, Operation Iron Bastion. He scrolled downward. Sole female operator in the unit to complete cross-territory convoy under direct hostile fire. He blinked and reread it. One assignment had her driving through a combat zone with fuel containers secured behind her. Another had her coordinating medical evacuation pathways under mortar bombardment. There existed even a commendation from a general typed, authorized, and digitized. She had never mentioned anything. Jaden looked toward the entrance. He looked at the snow descending like ash through the parking area illumination. He whispered, "We permitted her to depart alone." High on the mountain, Martha applied brakes abruptly, excessively forceful. The vehicle slid gradually and groaning toward a dark emptiness ahead. Her forward illumination captured it, the bridge or what remained of it. Half the structure had collapsed beneath ice and mass. Only one narrow passage remained, angled, frost-damaged, and covered in sections of black ice. It resembled an artifact from another century. No protective barriers, no assurances. Martha sat motionless, staring at it, her chest constricted. She could visualize the convoy again, observe the precipice edge in Kandahar. She remembered the smoke, the detonation, the silence on the radio following it, the face of Corporal Jansen, the youth who consistently carried his mother's scripture in his protective vest. He never returned, and presently she was here again, isolated with mass behind her and a pathway that challenged her to continue. But the nurse's voice resonated in her mind. Oxygen supplies are nearly depleted. She exhaled through her teeth and lowered the window. Wind struck her like a physical blow. She exited and stepped into the storm, footwear crushing against ice as she approached the bridge's edge. She tested the structural boards with her boot heel. They protested, shifted, but didn't fail. She returned to the vehicle and activated it. Gradual, regulated. One hand on the steering mechanism, one thought in her consciousness. If I halt, someone perishes. The vehicle rolled forward. Wheels scraped ice. The bridge groaned beneath the mass. The trailer wheels oscillated sideways, catching on frozen sections. An inferior operator would have excessively corrected. She didn't. She trusted gravitational force, trusted the wheels, trusted herself. She successfully crossed as the trailer cleared the bridge's final structural beam. She permitted herself to speak aloud, still present. Behind her, the bridge groaned once more, then collapsed entirely. Timber splintered and descended into the canyon below, consumed by the wind. No return route existed now. But Martha didn't look backward. She engaged the gear mechanism, vision secured on the forward roadway. Not merely through the snow, not merely through the storm, but through recollection, through the phantoms, through every "you're past your prime," every "you're merely a mechanic," every occasion someone provided the keys to an inexperienced operator and overlooked her. They were behind her presently, and she wasn't finished operating the vehicle. Morning arrived like an exhalation, gray, gradual, and weighted with the storm's aftermath. The blizzard had concluded, but its quietness persisted, covering everything in a frozen hush. Tree limbs drooped beneath ice's heaviness. Power cables shimmered in the dawn illumination. The environment appeared suspended, and through that stillness came the deep, consistent vibration of a diesel motor. Martha's vehicle descended the final incline gradually, its frontal grille encrusted in ice, clearing mechanisms rigid with frost. The Kenworth's exterior finish was nearly invisible beneath snow layers, forward illumination dimmed by mud and sleet, but it advanced, reliable, rumbling, determined that as she navigated the final turn, Mayville Hospital became visible. A modest brick structure, partially covered in snow accumulations, illumination flickering from emergency power generators. Outside, two nurses cleared a pathway toward the roadway, more from optimism than anticipation. Then they detected it. One released her digging implement. A horn sounded once, sharp and defiant, and the vehicle gradually halted. The operator's entrance opened with a creak, and Martha descended slowly, footwear crushing through the snow. Her outer garment was damaged, one eyebrow encrusted with frost, her facial skin raw and wind damaged, but she smiled. "Obtained your medications," she stated hoarsely, releasing the trailer closure. Personnel rushed outward, nurses, orderlies, even the custodian. They stared, mouths slack, as containers marked critical supplies were unloaded manually. Someone whispered, "She genuinely accomplished it?" Within the medical facility, the medicine was distributed within seconds. Vital signs stabilized. Oxygen containers were substituted. One nurse supported herself against a barrier, tears flowing freely as a child resumed independent respiration. Martha stood in the corridor briefly, observing everything. No formal addresses or attention, merely the quiet contentment of understanding she'd arrived punctually. Then she turned and returned into the cold. By the time she returned to the logistics facility, information had already circulated. The local newspaper featured her face, wind-damaged and determined, on the front section beneath the headline, "Veteran operator delivers life-preserving medicine in lethal blizzard." Then came the local television station, followed by regional affiliates. By midday, her name was gaining attention. But Martha didn't pause for interviews. She returned to her position in the workshop, same workbench, same coffee container, same grease-marked protective coverings as always, until the entrance opened. First arrived Jaden, hat removed, face colored. He stood quietly before her, holding a socket tool as though it was an offering. Then came the others, operators, technicians, dispatchers, individuals who had scarcely acknowledged her, now queued beside her individually. No formal addresses, no apologies, merely tools in hand, shoulders positioned, vision filled with something novel. Respect. Jaden was the initial speaker. "We weren't aware," he stated, "but we understand now, and we desire to acquire knowledge." Martha rose gradually, cleaning her hands on a cloth. "Acquire knowledge of what?" "How to accomplish what you did," he responded. "How to avoid freezing under pressure when everything's disintegrating. How to advance forward." She blinked. Briefly, she visualized her former unit, youthful faces, some departed, some transformed. She acknowledged once, then looked toward the snow-covered premises. "Then we should commence before the subsequent storm arrives." Weeks elapsed and the workshop transformed. What had been a neglected corner now hummed with engagement. Navigation charts covered the barriers. Emergency procedures were printed, protected, and posted. Martha conducted training exercises, nighttime scenarios, blackout navigation, crisis logistics. She didn't issue harsh commands. She posed questions, challenged them. And when someone panicked or became confused, she related a narrative, not to boast but to educate, regarding a roadside attack in Helmand, a frozen convoy in the Hindu Kush, a sandstorm in Baghdad where she operated blind for 12 miles, trusting the voice in her communication device. Individuals listened and they acquired knowledge. They began addressing her as coach. She didn't object. In the workshop's rear section, someone mounted a new marker, simple, carved in timber. "Courage is a choice." Martha Wilkins. She laughed upon seeing it, but she didn't remove it. And thus the storm concluded. Not merely the one that had covered the Midwest in ice, but the quiet one that had existed around Martha for years. The one composed of dismissive glances and unspoken uncertainties. She wasn't merely the mechanic anymore. She was the woman who responded to a summons when nobody else possessed the courage. And for the first time in an extended period, the environment perceived her not for her age or her quietness or the grease on her hands, but for the legacy she had driven directly through fire, ice, and recollection to establish. This narrative reminds us that genuine heroes don't require capes. They merely need a motivation to act. Would you have accepted the steering mechanism like Martha? Share your thoughts in the comments section. And if her courage moved you, don't forget to leave a positive rating, share, and subscribe to embrace the journey for more impactful narratives precisely like this one. We'll see you in the subsequent video.